Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The Uneasy Awakening. There comes a moment in life, sometimes early, sometimes late, when you begin to sense that something is wrong with the world. Not in the obvious sense of wars, corruption, or injustice, though those are part of it, but in something subtler, quieter, and far more pervasive. You feel it during conversations that skim the surface of existence, in the moments when laughter sounds hollow, or when silence between people is filled not with comfort but avoidance. You feel it when you look around and realize that most people seem content to live anesthetized, entertained, or distracted, while you cannot help but glimpse the layers underneath. You try to express this unease. Perhaps in a casual gathering you let slip a thought that carried weight, a question about meaning, truth, or the strangeness of existence itself. The reaction is almost always the same: uncomfortable silences, quick diversions, or disguised disdain dressed as humor. You begin to notice the pattern. The more you see, the less you are understood. The more deeply you think, the more alien you feel among those who seem satisfied with surfaces. At first, you may doubt yourself. Perhaps you are being arrogant. Perhaps you are too demanding, too serious, too unwilling to simply go with the flow. But deep down you realize this is not arrogance. It is awakening. You are not rejecting others for being shallow. You are simply unable to pretend anymore that shallow is enough. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most ruthless observers of human nature, understood this well. He wrote that a highly intellectual mind tends to become unsociable, not because it wishes to withdraw, but because society pushes it away. His insight reveals a cruel truth: the more awake you are, the more isolated you will feel. This is not coincidence but a pattern, one that repeats across cultures and centuries. Society has always feared those who awaken, for awakening forces others to question the illusions they depend on. Why does wisdom provoke fear while wealth, beauty, or power are celebrated? Because wisdom strips illusions bare. Wealth reinforces the dream of status. Beauty sustains the fantasy of perfection. Power feeds the illusion of control. But wisdom? True wisdom destroys comfort. It casts light where people would rather keep shadows. It demands honesty about life's pain, fragility, and impermanence. Most people, when faced with such truths, recoil. They prefer distraction to depth, entertainment to introspection, comfort to clarity. The result is a strange inversion, a society that rewards conformity and mediocrity while punishing lucidity. In such a world, to see clearly is to risk exile. To speak truth is to invite ridicule. To remain authentic is to guarantee solitude. If you have felt this exile, the quiet sense of being unwanted, misunderstood, or even ridiculed for your seriousness, know this: it is not your fault. You are not broken. You are not strange. You are awake. The discomfort you feel in social environments is not delusion but a sign of perception. You are noticing the cracks in the mask that most people wear so tightly they forget it is a mask at all. But awakening, while painful, carries with it a unique dignity. There is strength in refusing to surrender your clarity. There is greatness in refusing to settle for the numbing comforts of superficiality. And there is a possible path forward, not by forcing yourself to fit into a world that was never built for you, but by learning how to live authentically within it, without losing your essence. This chapter, then, is not an accusation against society nor a romanticization of loneliness. It is an acknowledgement of the reality that those who see too much often stand apart. The philosopher is not celebrated at the dinner table. The deep thinker is rarely embraced in casual gatherings. Yet it is precisely because of this distance that clarity emerges. Silence sharpens perception. Alienation creates space for insight. You may find yourself preferring silence to chatter, solitude to company, depth to distraction. This does not make you arrogant. It makes you true to yourself. And in that truth lies the seed of transformation. What society rejects as arrogance is often simply the refusal to betray one's own awareness. What others label as strangeness may in fact be a deeper fidelity to reality. And what feels like exile can, with time, become refuge, the place where the thinker grows strong enough not just to survive, but to illuminate. This is the uneasy awakening, the recognition that you see what others refuse to see, that your eyes remain open in a world that craves blindness. It is lonely, yes, but it is also powerful. And the more you lean into that power, the more you discover that being awake is not a curse but a calling. The mirror effect. There is a reason why your presence feels unsettling to others, even when you say little, even when you try to blend into the background. The reason is not arrogance, nor superiority, nor rudeness. It is something subtler, almost invisible, but powerful, the mirror effect. The mirror effect occurs when your depth of thought, your clarity of perception, or your unwillingness to live in illusions reflects something back to others that they are not ready to see. It is as if your very being holds up a mirror to their unexamined lives, and in that reflection, they catch a glimpse of their own emptiness, insecurity, or ignorance. You may simply ask a question others never considered. You may remain silent when everyone expects laughter. You may show composure where others expect anger, or honesty where others expect pretense. And suddenly, without realizing it, you disrupt the script. The person standing in front of you feels exposed, not because you attacked them, but because you reminded them, unconsciously, of what they try hardest to ignore. This is why people grow uneasy when conversations turn serious. This is why they respond with jokes, dismissals, or hostility when confronted with truths that strike too close to home. Your words are not merely words. They are silent invitations to introspection. And introspection hurts. Arthur Schopenhauer knew this well. He argued that a high intellect becomes lonely not out of choice but out of rejection, because society instinctively shields itself from mirrors that reveal what it prefers to hide. The thinker becomes dangerous precisely because they do not accept illusions as truth. Think of the last time you questioned something everyone else seemed to accept. Perhaps it was a social custom, a belief, or an assumption. The room may have grown tense. People may have shifted uncomfortably. Some may have even mocked you. That moment was not about you. It was about the mirror. Your question forced others to see the fragility of the structures they rest on, and few are willing to face such fragility. Most people build their identities not on truth but on borrowed ideas, cultural conditioning, and fragile egos. They depend on masks, masks of confidence, masks of certainty, masks of belonging. When you question too deeply or refuse to wear a mask yourself, you expose theirs. And no one likes to feel naked in that way. Rejection, then, is rarely personal. It is not about you. It is about the discomfort you awaken. It is about the reflection that unsettles. And yet, the rejection feels personal because it isolates you. You begin to wonder why you cannot just go along, why your thoughts create distance instead of closeness. But understand this, the problem is not your depth. The problem is what your depth reveals. This is why throughout history, great thinkers, writers, and visionaries have been marginalized. Not because they were wrong, but because they were mirrors in a society built on masks. Socrates was silenced, Galileo forced into denial, Nietzsche dismissed as mad. They reflected truths the world did not want to face. And you, in your own life, experience this same dynamic in smaller ways. At work, at school, among friends, even within family. Your perspective unsettles. Your awareness creates distance. And you feel it as loneliness, rejection, or misunderstanding. Yet, paradoxically, the mirror effect is not a weakness. It is a gift. For what others see as disruption is actually clarity. What they resist is what they most need. And while their rejection may push you to the margins, it is from the margins that truth has always spoken loudest. You are not wrong for being a mirror. You are not broken for unsettling others. You are awake, and your very presence reminds others of the choice they refuse to make, to live in truth or to remain in illusion. Most will choose illusion. But a few, a rare few, will look into the mirror you hold and recognize themselves. And those few will change. This is the power and the burden of the mirror effect. You awaken discomfort, but within that discomfort lies the seed of transformation. You may not see it immediately. Often you will not be thanked. But your existence plants questions in others that they cannot unsee. So do not curse the mirror you carry. Do not silence yourself out of shame. The world resists because the world is fragile. But fragility is not forever. And sometimes, a single mirror is all it takes to crack an entire wall of illusions. Comfort over truth. If the mirror effect explains why individuals recoil when confronted with depth, the broader question remains, why does society as a whole choose comfort over truth? Why does it reward conformity, celebrate distraction, and marginalize those who dare to think? The answer is both cultural and instinctive. Truth is destabilizing. Comfort, by contrast, is safe. And human beings, as creatures of survival, have always chosen safety over clarity. Truth has never been gentle. It does not whisper. It tears away illusions, dismantles certainties, and demands courage. To face reality without the filters of denial, distraction, or illusion requires strength, and strength is rare. The majority do not want to be strong, they want to be secure. They do not want to live in reality, they want to live in reassurance. Comfort, then, becomes the silent currency of society. It binds people together, not truth. This explains why schools reward memorization instead of curiosity, why workplaces value obedience over creativity, and why culture amplifies spectacle instead of substance. Conformity sustains order. Repetition sustains predictability. Common sense, even when it is false, sustains cohesion. The deep thinker, however, disrupts all of this. By asking a simple, why, they risk collapsing the fragile structure of shared illusions. That is why thinkers are rarely honored in their lifetimes. They are not seen as wise but as dangerous. Arthur Schopenhauer recognized this pattern clearly. He wrote that most people live under what he called the blind will, a drive not to understand but to survive, not to question but to persist with the least discomfort possible. To pursue truth, then, is not simply unusual, it is antisocial. It requires rupture. It demands losing the false comforts that give life stability. And very few are willing to pay that price. Think of the rituals of everyday life. The student who repeats formulas without reflection is praised with high grades. The employee who follows orders without asking questions is promoted. The citizen who agrees with the majority, no matter how shallow, is labeled good. Meanwhile, the one who pauses, questions, or resists is branded arrogant, subversive, or problematic. Society cannot afford too many thinkers. It can afford only followers. This is why, when you express depth, you feel out of place. You are not playing the game of comfort. You are interrupting it. Your refusal to settle exposes the hidden rules, that society rewards the obedient, not the insightful. And so, in subtle or obvious ways, the system excludes you. It is no coincidence that the most consumed content in our modern age is fast, shallow, and sensational. Viral clips, quick jokes, endless scrolling, these are the tools of distraction. They keep the masses entertained, anesthetized, asleep. Deep thought requires silence. It requires time. It requires discomfort. And in a world addicted to instant gratification, discomfort is rebellion. Thus, the intelligent person becomes dangerous, not because they break laws or defy authority, but because they disrupt the spell of comfort. They walk slowly where others rush. They pause where others flee. They demand meaning where others demand distraction. And in doing so, they remind society of its emptiness. From childhood onward, people are conditioned not to question but to conform. Schools standardize thought. Media simplifies complexity. Algorithms feed us what we already believe, never what we need to confront. The system is designed not to awaken but to distract. And when someone refuses distraction, when someone dares to see the gears behind the facade, society reacts as though protecting itself from a virus. The thinker becomes the outsider, the threat, the one who must be neutralized. But what if the so-called virus is actually the cure? What if deep thinking is the only remedy for the existential void so many feel but cannot explain? If that is true, then society's rejection of the thinker is not just tragic but ironic. For the very people who are mocked, silenced, or ignored may hold the keys to meaning. This is the paradox: society fears what it needs most. It pushes away those who could heal its emptiness. And in doing so, it condemns itself to cycles of distraction, illusion, and denial. The thinker, meanwhile, carries the burden of clarity, a burden that isolates but also elevates. If you have ever felt like the world resents your questions, understand this: you are not resented for being wrong. You are resented for being right too soon, for refusing to bow to comfort, for daring to ask for truth in a world built on lies. And while that rejection hurts, it is also proof of your necessity. Comfort keeps society stable. But truth is what transforms it. And it is always the few, never the many, who dare to choose truth over comfort. The loneliness of seeing too much. Once you begin to see what others refuse to see, a new companion quietly enters your life: loneliness. Not the ordinary loneliness of missing company, but a deeper solitude that comes from perceiving a reality most people actively avoid. It is not that you do not wish to belong, but that belonging comes at the price of silence, pretense, and betrayal of your clarity. And so, over time, you withdraw. History has always been cruel to those who saw too much. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth, when all he did was teach people to question. Galileo was forced to deny the evidence of his own eyes to avoid execution. Nikola Tesla died alone in a hotel room while others built empires on the foundation of his discoveries. Even Schopenhauer, one of the sharpest minds of the 19th century, lived in disdain and isolation, his brilliance recognized only after death. The pattern is relentless: the deeper the vision, the harsher the rejection. To see too much is to threaten the system, to expose illusions, to disturb the fragile comfort that holds society together. And society, in turn, reacts with fear, resentment, and exclusion. But this rejection is not confined to philosophers or scientists. It appears in everyday life, in small conversations and subtle gestures. You feel it when you mention silence while others gossip about reality shows. You feel it when you question the meaning of existence while your peers share the latest viral meme. Over time, you learn to hold back, to censor yourself, not because you have nothing to say but because you know few will listen. This is the loneliness of the thinker, a silence not chosen but imposed, a distance created not by pride but by perception. The more awake you are, the fewer places you find where you can rest your thoughts. And slowly, you begin to wonder if something is wrong with you. But here lies the paradox: this loneliness is not proof of failure, but of vision. It is the natural consequence of walking a path others are too afraid to take. You are not isolated because you are broken. You are isolated because you refuse to betray your awareness. The loneliness you feel is not punishment. It is the cost of authenticity. There is, however, a distinction worth making. Forced isolation feels like exile. Chosen solitude, on the other hand, can become sanctuary. The first drains you, the second renews you. And the journey of the thinker often begins in exile but can transform into sanctuary if embraced with courage. Schopenhauer believed that solitude is not only inevitable for the awakened but necessary. For in solitude, the mind finds clarity. Noise fades. Distractions weaken. And what once felt like punishment begins to reveal itself as freedom. When you are no longer bound by the shallow conversations of the crowd, you begin to hear your own voice with new strength. Yet this transformation is not easy. It requires letting go of the desire to be understood by everyone. It requires accepting that most people are not prepared for your depth. It requires courage to stop fighting for approval in places where there is no fertile ground for truth. And in doing so, you begin to notice something profound. Loneliness is not the absence of connection, but the presence of authenticity. One deep dialogue is worth more than 1,000 empty interactions. One kindred spirit outweighs a crowd of masks. Quality, not quantity, becomes your measure of belonging. Yes, the loneliness of seeing too much can feel heavy, even unbearable at times. But it is also the doorway to a freer, truer existence. The world may turn you into a lone wolf, but solitude can sharpen your sight, strengthen your voice, and deepen your wisdom. The challenge is to endure the exile long enough for solitude to transform into strength. To carry your clarity not as a burden but as a beacon. For in the end, loneliness is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of a new way of being. The gift of solitude. If loneliness is the price of clarity, then solitude is the gift hidden within that price. To most, solitude feels like exile, an unwanted distance from society. But to the awakened, solitude can become sanctuary, a sacred space where the mind, no longer bound by shallow noise, begins to hear itself fully. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that solitude was not only inevitable for the thinker but essential. For him, the elevated mind was destined to walk alone, not as punishment, but as liberation. A man can be himself, he wrote, only so long as he is alone. In other words, the very condition others dread can become the soil in which authentic life takes root. To live authentically in a world addicted to illusions requires strategy. Not every listener deserves your depth. Not every place can hold your truth. This does not mean living in silence forever, it means becoming selective. Choose carefully whom you confide in, where you express yourself, and when you remain silent. A single genuine conversation outweighs 1,000 empty exchanges. A single kindred spirit offers more nourishment than endless crowds. Solitude also invites creation. A restless mind, when given space, begins to transform its insights into expression. Writing, painting, building, teaching, all become vessels through which clarity finds form. If intelligence finds no outlet, it implodes, turning against itself. But when channeled, it illuminates, shaping beauty and meaning out of chaos. The loneliness of the thinker, therefore, can be transmuted into art, philosophy, and truth. In this age of distraction, such creation is a quiet act of rebellion. While others scroll endlessly, seeking momentary relief from emptiness, the thinker can carve permanence out of silence. A journal, a canvas, a page, or even a simple conversation with oneself becomes a weapon against the void. In solitude, thought ceases to be a burden and becomes a gift, not only for the thinker but for those few who are ready to receive it. Yet solitude is not meant to be endless exile. The world still holds kindred souls. They are rare, scattered, often hidden in the noise of the masses. But they exist, the few who also see, who also awaken, who also hunger for meaning. The Internet, despite its distractions, has made it possible for these scattered spirits to find one another. Reading groups, philosophical forums, letters exchanged in quiet corners of the digital world, these can become sanctuaries for the awakened. Your tribe may be small, but it exists. Still, even with tribe and creation, the challenge remains: being intelligent in a world that fears intelligence will never be easy. The deeper you go, the lonelier the path may seem. But loneliness is not without purpose. It refines. It hardens. It reveals what truly matters. And within that loneliness lies the hidden gift, perspective. The awakened see what others cannot. They see the fragility of illusions, the brevity of life, the hunger for meaning buried beneath distractions. They see through appearances into essence. And while this vision often isolates, it also empowers. What makes you excluded is precisely what makes you necessary. The world needs those who walk outside its illusions. It needs mirrors that expose, voices that question, and minds that refuse to bow to comfort. It may not admit it. It may resist, reject, even mock. But history shows that those who were once exiled for seeing too much often become the very figures who shape the future. This is the final twist: the solitude that feels like burden is in fact your strength. The silence that feels like exile is in fact your sanctuary. What makes you misunderstood is exactly what makes you vital. Your task is not to fit in, but to awaken. Not to conform, but to illuminate. So embrace solitude not as a curse, but as a companion. Guard your clarity, channel your depth, seek the few who see as you do, and create in the silence that others fear. For in solitude lies not emptiness, but truth. And truth, though it hurts, is the only path to freedom.